So with our recording in process, let me welcome you all one more time. My name is Sarah Salty. I am the Director of Leadership and Learning Programs at the Center for Partnership Studies. And on behalf of the center, we're really delighted that you're all sharing this time with us today. I'm hoping most of you have gotten the word that we have made a decision to change the emphasis of our program today for you to respond to the current state of the world that we're all living in, and specifically to speak in a more focused and directed way to supporting all of you in this time of pandemic, in this time of school closures, in this time of rapid reorganization and response to the evolving circumstances of this virus. We are not losing track, however, of the original intention, which was to bring you a webinar with these incredible panelists speaking specifically to trauma-sensitive schools. And we want you to know that that webinar will also be happening. We're just pushing it back by a couple weeks to make space to do this first, which felt more urgent and relevant in this moment. We want to begin today also, before I introduce our panelists, with just a quick shout out, thank you to some organizations that helped us to promote and market this webinar and get the word out. That's brought so many of you to this program. Looks like there's getting close to 250 folks on now, and we know that many more hundreds will be watching this in the replay. And so we welcome you as well if you're not able to be here with us live, but are watching this after the fact. So the co-sponsors that were so helpful in getting helping get all of you here and getting the word out include the Happy Movement, Bhavana Kids, the Urban Yoga Foundation, the Holistic Life Foundation, Delaware Changing Lives with Gift Global, the Youth Learning Institute, Think Shops, SUNY Oswego Teacher Opportunity Corps, Bree Mathers and her program Love the Skin You're In, Crystal Gypsy Designs, Rainbow Lavina, Meridian University, Finding Your Footprint, and Dr. Ram Bhagat. Thank you all so much. If you're here with us, we send you a our warm gratitude. And if you're here because you heard it through one of those co-sponsors, please let them know that and thank them for helping you find out about this event today. So before I introduce our panelists and hand this all over to them, I want to just mention two people who are not on your screen, but who have been instrumental in helping to organize this event. One of them is Jason Campbell, who brought us at the Center for Partnership Studies in connection with Mary, who then brought us in connection with Khayree. And so we really thank you, Jason, and also for your help in helping to sort of sort out and structure our thinking about what we're offering here. And then also Ann Amberg, who is in the chat room with you all and will be sharing links and resources with you both during our time today and also after our webinar today. She'll be sending all of you a really robust set of resources that we've compiled for you through email. So you'll watch for that email from Ann after the close of the webinar today. And thank you, Anne, for all your hard work in bringing this all together. So let me introduce our three panelists, and then I will hand it to Khayree to sort of begin our time together in a mindful way. So Dr. Mary Crnobori, How about you say it, Mary?
Sure, Crnobori.
Crnobori.
Sarah.
I gave it a shot.
Believe me, you can call me Mary. I'm accustomed to it.
We'll call you Dr.
offense.
Mary. I actually went online and they had like a pronunciation program that said it for somebody, but he didn't pronounce it the way you did.
Well, I appreciate your effort.
Dr. Mary is coordinator of trauma-informed schools for the 169 school Metro Nashville Public School District. And she's working at the district level there in the Nashville area to raise awareness of childhood and intergenerational trauma using a collective impact framework to promote system-wide changes and implementation of school-wide trauma-sensitive practices. We also have with us Khayree Bey, who is a teacher in the Colonial School District in Delaware. He was 2019 SHAPE Delaware's Health Teacher of the Year, and he is implementing an equity-based, trauma-informed approach in his classroom based on the art of mindfulness, comedic yoga, and other self-care practices. And he is also teaching other teachers, community, and staff members to do the same. And Khayree also serves on the Colonial School District's Educators of Color Committee, which is focusing on equity and the underrepresented population in teaching by recruiting and assisting and maintaining educators of color. So welcome, Khayree. And our third panelist today is Rhian Eisler. And Riane is an internationally known as a systems scientist, as an attorney working for the rights of women and children, and is author of groundbreaking books such as The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics, and most recently, a book called Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Shape Our Brains, Our Lives, and Our Future. Riane is the founder and president of the Center for Partnership Studies, which is dedicated to research and education on social and economic transformation. She's also the co-founder of the Center for Partnership Studies' Caring Economy campaign. And with Nobel Peace Laureate Betty Williams, she's co-founder of the Spiritual Alliance to Stop Intimate Violence. She's also editor-in-chief of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies, an online peer-reviewed journal which is housed at the University of Minnesota and was inspired by Dr. Eisler's work. And Riane, did you want to say a word of welcome before we turn to Khayree to set the stage in mindfulness? Oh, Riane, I believe you're on mute.
Is not.
There you go. There you go. Oh. Click it one. There you go.
There.
I think we were both trying to do it at the same time. I apologize for that.
Sent conflicting messages. My message to you is welcome. I will chime in later in this webinar, but for now I want to say that I feel so grateful, really, that Mary and Khayree can join us today. Because I know that so many of us, whether we're educators, whether we're parents, whether we're students, or whether we're people, would like more information, and they are able to give it. And in the next webinar, we'll go back to the old plan, which was for me to contextualize all of this in the context of my research over many decades now. So with that said, and with thanks to Sarah and Anne and Jason for making all this possible, I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
Well, I think we're going to begin with Khayree. And go ahead, Khayree. We would like to start today by setting a stage of mindfulness and presence for all of us, so that we can sort of begin on the right note here.
That's right. Can you hear me? I want to just make sure everything is
yes.
Clear loud. All right. I do this every day. with each one of my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes. It's kind of a self-regulation technique that I've taught them. One of the acronyms that we use is STOP, take a breath, analyze the situation, focus on a positive future, with you in it. And that's the main thing that I want them to understand. They're kind of like mindful ninjas. They find a way to self-regulate in tough times. And that's what, it's tough in middle school. It's tough in all school settings. And even as an adult and caregiver, you need these same self-care practices. So I'm going to start this off by teaching you how to abdominally breathe real quick so that you get the most out of this mindful meditation here. So when you inhale, I'm going to use this breathing ball. So when you inhale, I want you to take a deep breath, pushing your belly out as if you're filling the balloon. And then when you exhale, I want you to take your belly button and push it to your spine. We're going to do this twice. So with me, inhale, exhale. One more time, inhale, exhale. Now, we're going to begin. Because what I want you to do is sit up straight in your chair, aligning your head, neck, and spine. I want you to put your feet flat on the floor if you can. If not, cross them at the ankles. And then place your hands comfortably in your lap or on your knee. I'm going to guide you through 5 deep abdominal breaths. At the sound of the bell, we'll begin. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. One last time with me. Inhale. Holding it and sighing it out. From here, I want you to go back to breathing on your own, kind of focusing on any sensation you may feel. From here, I want you to raise your shoulders up, back, and down, kind of releasing any tension you may feel in your upper back, neck, or shoulders. From here, I want you to take a gentle swallow, allowing your tongue to drop from the roof of your mouth, and swallowing gently again. Release any tension you may have in your eyebrow area. And just like in life, some things may be distracting. Someone in the other room with your kids being home. Maybe it's just ruminating thoughts of the past or the future. But let those come and go without judgment and use your breath as an anchor. I'm going to ring the bell 3 times. On the 3rd ring, I want you to listen till you can hear the bell no longer, blinking your eyes 3 times and bringing yourself back to the moment. If you haven't already, blink your eyes 3 times, bring yourself back to the moment. All right. Thank you for joining me. This is something that I do each day, several times a day. It really it helps our kids kind of regulate. They're coming to class after lunch or after a long hour-and-a-half period. Gives them a chance to kind of reset, get all that energy out, and gives them a chance to get into their cognitive side of their brain and really start to get some of the lessons. It's also part of relationship building, which I think is the biggest part of educating the whole child, is establishing those relationships. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Khayree, for starting us off that way. I think you've created this space for all of us to listen more in a more relaxed and present way. And I want to invite, and we'll hear more from you, I know, coming up. But now let's have Dr. Mary share with us some of the kind of framework of ways she's come up with to think about how sort of from a district level perspective, some of the principles we can be thinking about as we are approaching our parents, our teachers, our children, our school communities at this time. So Mary, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And also thank you, Khayree, for that grounding, mindful moment. You know, something that I've learned along the way, and embarrassingly, it probably took me longer than I would have liked to learn it, but one of the best ways to learn to stay regulated yourself, which is so instrumental in our work, is to teach others to regulate themselves. So you teachers out there, educators, parents, anyone who works with children or other human beings, helping teach others or helping others get regulated will be so beneficial for you. I too am just grateful to be here with you all, Khayree and Dr. Rhian Eisler. It's a real honor and a privilege to participate in this forum. We were putting it together already and just clearly saw the critical and urgent need to, reframe and contextualize and acknowledge the problem that we're facing in the world today. I'm also humbled to be joined by friends from home here in Nashville and my state of Tennessee, as well as in faraway places from surrounding countries. So again, humbled and honored. But yeah, I just wanted to jump off by acknowledging the problem. So some of us may have heard in the work around trauma-informed schools or trauma-informed care, a reluctance or resistance to identify the gravity of the traumas that our kids today face. And something that this work, the neurobiological science, as well as an understanding of trauma calls for, is to really start by acknowledging and contextualizing what we face. So the nature of these extraordinary and uncertain times that we're in today really calls for specifically acknowledging, the gravity of this situation that we're experiencing both collectively and personally. The characteristic of events make it more or less likely to experience symptoms of trauma. Factors such as whether the event has a sudden and unexpected onset or extreme circumstances surrounding the event, whether it's unpredictable and in particular experienced as outside of one's control, and also whether there's a real or perceived threat to life. All of those things factor into whether or not we may develop symptoms of trauma or chronic toxic stress. And we know that some or even many people will experience symptoms of PTSD and complex trauma during or as a result of our current public health crisis. Therefore, it's important for everyone to know and remember that different kids and different people, all of us, respond in very different ways to stress and trauma. For example, just in the last few days, I've been around a kindergartner that even while school was still in session a week ago, last Friday actually, a kindergartner that it was experiencing panic attacks because a friend came to school and said, there's a pandemic, and what does that mean? My own 10-year-old, I talked to him and will continue to talk to him in an ongoing fashion about this. And he said, I'm not really too worried about it right now. But he also jumped at the chance to talk about it and express his feelings, particularly for a kid that may not always want to talk about feelings. Teenagers may express fear they may act totally nonchalant about it, like they're not worried, or they might get fired up about social justice and finding ways to help because that's developmentally where they are. So in kids, symptoms of stress and trauma can manifest as anxiety. They might be clingy, they might act out or cry or withdraw or shut down. They might become overly rigid or overly exert the need for control or be overly active. I just think it's so important to emphasize that different kids and people respond to stress and trauma in different ways, and many of the things that we're seeing in ourselves and one another can be responses to the stress. So I also want to just mention that my community is Nashville. So I live in Nashville, and as Sarah said, I'm the coordinator of trauma-informed schools for a huge public school system here in Nashville. And exactly 1 week before the major onset of this pandemic, much of our community was destroyed by tornadoes here locally. We were already experiencing significant community trauma and distress. As a school system and as a city, we were very much in fight, flight, or freeze mode collectively, but also completely activated to help and respond. Yet we were already leveraged to help support others in need where schools started to shut down, when schools started to shut down for the pandemic last week. We had already set up donation and distribution centers for families to access food and resources surrounding the tornadoes. Now these are continuing for the pandemic. We're really gearing up to provide digital ways to support physical and social emotional health and wellness for our community, and also learning opportunities. And we're really finding ways to connect both personally and from a distance. We're sending resources to students, families, and educators. In fact, just today, one of the vendors that I work with in the school system, it's a company called Move This World that maybe I'll talk more about in the next webinar, we'll be sending video-based resources for elementary, middle, and high school age students to participate in things like breathing exercises and calming regulation activities like Khayree modeled for us right there in their very homes, to kind of establish some continuity and consistency for kids who did have access to those things at school as part of our trauma-informed schools work. We're really emphasizing the need for interpersonal connection. We're trying to organize online information sessions and forums for kids to be able to ask questions, to allow young people to have a voice and honor their questions and their need to know and understand what's going on during this time, to really give space to talk about it. So I want to really focus, I said all of that to kind of set the stage for the main points I want to emphasize. I really want to focus on the antidote for what we can do to help support wellness and allow kids to thrive during these uncertain times. And the answer lies in the power of compassion. So through these times, we have to be careful ourselves not to succumb to despair. For the sake of our kids, we must be mindful of our own fear, our own level of regulation and own internal experiences, and really intentionally avoid spreading anxiety. Fortunately, we have great power to promote resilience and support well-being. And there are very much excellent things we can do to support physical, social, emotional, and mental health and wellness, and help all kids thrive during this time. Relationships and connection are the main agents for change. And with love and compassion, anything is possible. And it remains so important to continually keep coming back to that wisdom. So I want to talk about 4 practical strategies, 4 things that we can do right now. And those things include fostering compassion and connection, providing empathy and insight, being intentionally mindful of and responsive to equity, and instilling hope for the future in our kids. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time discussing each of those 4 things. So the first important thing we can do is to foster compassionate connection. When we think about connection, it's so important to remember that connection is multifaceted. So there's connection with ourselves in our own inner experience. Of course, there's connection with others, our loved ones, our friends, those that we spend our days and our time with. And then connection in the world around us. So that could be connection with nature, that could be connection with society as a whole and our collective experience. When it comes to personal connection, I think the arduous times we're facing can also be a time where we can seize the opportunity to strengthen our connection with family and friends. Accordingly, this can very much be a time where we can slow down and strengthen our connection with ourselves. Remember that still silent inner voice, or our connection to our own experience. And then, of course, from a distance is very, very important during these times when many of us are experiencing social distancing, right? And under a quarantine. So it's important to consider how we can cultivate connection remotely to maintain and support connections with our community. After all, a sense of belongingness and acceptance and being seen and being important as a part of a group is such an essential buffer to mitigate stress. So one thing that's really important to do as we're fostering compassionate connection is to make it a point to talk to kids, to talk and and connect through dialogue, but also to talk about it, to talk about what's going on in person with family. Could be by phone with friends. It could be online platforms, like I mentioned before, for kids and for parents to ask questions and just connect in the experiences we're having, and kind of a real time, what we're engaged in during this time of quarantine. It could be through hotlines or staying connected through daily email resources or insights or other creative uses of technology. Another thing that's really important to do to support kids and ourselves also is to maintain a sense of normalcy somehow. Keep that structure in your home. Maintain your routine as much as possible through keeping a schedule. We can use this time to embrace perhaps the first time many of us have experienced in a long time where we're not overly busy, but also stay active in meaningful things and things that we love. Also, with compassionate connection, it's really important to emphasize the positive and to emphasize action, what we can do about it. This will also go a long way to buffer stress for kids. The types of action that we can do can focus on self-care, intentional actions to help others, and just intentionally connect. So some important ways we can emphasize the positive and action can be, and connections can be through stories and storytelling. It may be in reading or listening to stories ourselves. Maybe as adults or kids, we keep books that we, connect with the narratives of others on our bedside tables, or allow kids access to meaningful audiobooks. It can also be through storytelling. Throughout history, storytelling has perhaps, in oral histories, oral traditions, is one of the most essential ways to maintain the well-being of society, particularly through arduous times. Other ways we can emphasize self-care and connection and focus on the positive is by connecting with music. So perhaps listening to music, making music, and really any form of creative expression. So right now, while kids are at home from school, it's really important to encourage them to engage in things like journaling, and also do that ourselves. Drawing, it could be cooking, any form of creative expression. Movement and staying active becomes really important. The more it can be mindful activities such as yoga, or it could be just taking walks in the neighborhood with family. That rhythm and repetition that comes with movement, even just the simple act of walking, is so regulating for the brain and so essential for our health and well-being. And really, ultimately, any hobby or thing, anything that brings us joy, is really important to make sure that we cultivate time in our schedules to engage in right now, and most certainly for our kids. So the second practical strategy I want to talk about is to provide empathy and insight for kids and help them make meaning. So empathy really refers to letting go of the need to fix the problem for them. I think with this pandemic, most of us feel like we can't necessarily fix this and we can't control it. And it really calls for empathy. What we can do, which has so much power, which actually can go far further than fixing. Empathy involves focusing on creating sacred space for others, feeling with, creating sacred space for ourselves as well as those connections with others. So the strategy, honing in on the even more practical that I want to share for this section about providing empathy and insight, the strategy is to ask, listen, and validate. So with kids, I'll repeat it again, we really want, and when the way we communicate with kids, effective communication with kids during high stressful times involves asking, listening, and validating. First and foremost, we want to be sure to ask kids questions. And then once we ask them intentional questions, we want to give ample listening time. So we give space to hear their responses. Often kids get cut off and they don't have enough student voice or young person voice where we just listen with awareness and attentiveness. It's really important that kids and people in general have a voice and a listening ear where they feel heard and understood. So some really specific questions that may be really helpful to ask kids right now include things like, how are you feeling today? Or how are you feeling about what's happening in the world right now? We can ask them, how does living through this health pandemic make you feel? And then perhaps this is the most important, asking, what do you need? Or how can I help given how you feel? We can ask kids what kind of things they think that we can do to stay happy and healthy during this time, or how can we help others, or what is your hope for those impacted? So once we've asked questions and listened to their responses, then we want to make sure to validate any and all feelings that they shared. When we validate their feelings, we just can say, we understand, and maybe we've felt that way at one time or another too. We might also provide insight, solutions, and hope. In our responses, we really want to focus on resilience by intentionally helping kids and ourselves and others, by the way, make positive meaning out of these extraordinary circumstances. That may be the most important thing to be resilient and tap into our own capacity for self-healing is the meaning we make out of hard times. In fact, Viktor Frankl said, the moment suffering finds meaning, it ceases to be suffering. So the meaning that we make becomes very important, and our kids are tremendously relying on us during these times to help them make meaning of difficult things. The third practical strategy I want to say a few words about includes being intentionally mindful of and responsive to equity. So I think Khayree's going to talk a little bit more about equity too, because we simply cannot emphasize that enough all the time, and most certainly during these times. So times like these remind us that we must continuously disrupt and address issues of hate and bias that emerge and persist in our world and in our institutions, including schools. It's really important right now that we speak up about racialized fear and racism in the public discourse around the coronavirus. We can acknowledge the historical context of blame, stigma, and oppression of marginalized groups during times of stress and trauma in our world. And currently, in the current context, this is a time where Asians may be stigmatized or the subject of racist comments, and we really need to speak up about that and inform kids about why that's not all right. And also there's a socioeconomic disadvantage that don't have the same access to health and healing during this time. It's really important to just speak up during these times. We must also intentionally acknowledge the fact that all kids will not have the same access to comfortable and safe conditions and resources, or the same access to healing and recovery from this pandemic. Right, for example, right now, many districts are considering how to ensure students have essential educational resources, such as ensuring digital learning tools or access to meals, supplies, and technology. So it's important to remember that for a district to remain open, educational programming must be delivered for all students, every student in a district. That includes all educational programming, including, you know, resources like food, supplies, as well as the education. And we have to be able to ensure equitable access to those things. And so it becomes so critical to be intentionally mindful of and responsive to equity during these times. Finally, I want to end my little portion here by instilling or by emphasizing the need to instill hope for the future in our kids and in ourselves. So we are resilient beings. Humans have an astounding capacity for self-healing and growth. That's the good news. And kids have an even more tremendous capacity than we do as adults. So we really need to maintain our focus on post-traumatic growth during these times. We can and must use challenging life experiences to create richer and more meaningful ways of living. And the time is now to start doing that. We can help children and one another by continually instilling hope and working for the good of our collective humanity and remembering our civic responsibility to one another in society. And we must allow ourselves to be continually amazed that the worst of times can remind us of our true nature and bring out the best in us and the best in society. So we already have an inherent ability to be resilient. We are already resilient creatures, personally and collectively. We have tremendous power through compassion to help our kids and our world be resilient. And we have the capacity for, and we will be a resilient society. So I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to hold on to hope. So I hope by remembering these 4 things that we can do on a day-to-day basis right now, we can all impact the well-being of our kids and come out on the other end of this flourishing like we never have before.
Thank you so much, Mary. That's a wonderful set of things, and you expressed them so clearly. Thank you so much. I think we're going to turn next to hear from Khayree, who as Mary said, will kind of elaborate a little bit on the equity issues of the current moment, as well as really sharing with us some resources that can be helpful. So go ahead, Khayree.
Yes, and let me say, Mary, thank you for all that information, and your expertise is definitely needed, and you are a lesson to your school district, and you've come to Delaware many a times and given some great professional developments. I've attended a few myself, very important information, especially during this time. Again, you know, we've kind of changed our lens on what we were going to kind of do today. And there's no greater time to really push the how big of a role that trauma-informed care really is, because it's a mindset. It's a mindset that you have where you find out where the child is and you're dealing with the whole child. Many of our students come with so much in their invisible backpacks, many teachers like to say. You don't know what they've been through those nights before. Now the tables have turned, and they're in some of those tough situations for a long period of time. Just the other day, I was with my school handing out Chromebooks and educational packets, and you could see the look not just in the students' eyes as they drove up with their parents, but in their parents' eyes. There's a sense of this is new territory. I'm almost 50 years old myself, and we've been through a lot as a nation, as a people in general, but this is something new for us all. So I'm going to go over some of the things that you can use to maybe get through these tough times. Mary did an excellent job of listing some of those things. Like I said, one of the first things is being trauma-informed is a mindset, and your child is going to be home with you for this extended period of time. And just as an educator, one of the things that I put my hat on is being really big on relationships. And no one knows your child better than you do. One of the things I would say to teachers is you do no extra harm. During this time, their routines are being broken. And during those times when a child's routine has been broken, they find it hard to self-regulate. We deal with this as teachers, educators, counselors, and all. And the trauma that they're going through now, and then you throw in poverty, you throw in lack of access to resources, and we have many children that are going through multiple traumas right now. Just like Mary's region down there with going tornadoes and all, I teach in an area where trauma is a regular, everyday experience. So these kids, I mean, they have their resilience, but at this time, this is the time where we can get some of those resources out there. Maybe volunteering your time. Tomorrow, I'm going to go in our district, Colonial School District in Delaware, one of the largest districts. I have to give them a lot of praise for what they've done these last couple of days, getting our kids their academic resources and now supplying meals throughout the area. We are using our busing system to deliver to those kids that cannot make it to some of the drop-off points. I mean, a lot of our children, not only do they not have access to internet or maybe just even devices, a lot of them live in food deserts. There's nothing there for them. I have children that say they eat several times a day at a Wawa and are, you know what I mean? And maybe that's just twice, and it's not always the best thing. So for us to go around and get a nutritional meal to our most vulnerable is big. And from what I can see around the nation, many school districts are stepping up and being the backbone of the community, which a lot of public schools and charter schools have been for a long time. So I give a lot of credit and kudos to them. One of the big things that you want to do also while your child is home is establish safety, a routine. They're looking for that. School, I know children always come home and they may act like they're too cool for school, but they are missing it now, and so are the parents. A lot of the resources that I'm going to give out are free resources to actually maybe enhance what you know about being trauma informed, or SEL training, mindfulness training, or quick little mindful moments that you can use for yourself. I think Anne said something that is very important. You have to have your own self-care practice because it has to be innate. Because when you are dealing with this child, they're playing off of you. If you're panicking during this time, the child is going to panic. Anxiety and stress is very, very a community thing. Everyone feels it. We go through it together. That's that interconnection that we have as a community, as a world population. And you can see it now how something that happened far away from here is now affecting us in real time. And it's catching up. And this is going to be a long haul. This doesn't seem to be a quick resolution. So we're going to really have to rely on each other more than ever. Again, one of the things that I also want to emphasize is if you do have that time or the resources, go and check on those that aren't in the same position that you are. One of the greatest things after I got off the phone with one of my district reps on going and feeding throughout the neighborhood was my son, who's part of the district that I go to. He was like, can I participate too? And I'm sure he has many friends out there that are going, I wouldn't mind giving back at this time. Now, I know for safety reasons, we are trying to stay away from each other, but check on your neighbors. Check on the ones that are in need the most. See if you can deliver something to them. That's I think Mary was touching on how this is the time to show that empathy and be there for others. One of the other things that I wanted to cover was once we do get through this, you're going to be receiving children that have been through a lot of trauma. And it may not be this, all of a sudden they're coming back and we bombard them with the rigor and the educational side, because again, you're going to have to deal with the whole child. And a lot of times it's those relationships that you're going to build with them and meeting them where they are at. These children are going to be coming home from a very coming back from a very stressful time. Their parents are going to be going through a very stressful time. We're only in the beginning. I think I also want to make sure that to give you some of the things that I've used in class. Like I said, relationship building is very big for me. And one of the things that I've noticed that kids find as something, you may not be a therapist, but you can be therapeutic to yourself and your loved ones. My son came home from Temple University. You know, he's very upset that, I mean, college is ending. This isn't the college experience that he would want to have to now do this online. But there's a lot of things that you can learn from your children about them while they are home. This is an opportunity for those relationship building with you and your child. I noticed that one of my sons told me, he's like, you know what? One of the things that he uses to calm himself down is lo-fi music. Now, to me, that was pretty funny because it sounds like acid jazz or something. But this is something that they do use to kind of regulate themselves so they can kind of get into their homework. My youngest is starting to listen to it, and I actually play it in class, and I have several students that come back and go, that lo-fi music is very relaxing to me. So it's something that you can actually try out. And for some of my hip hop heads, Jay Dilla is kind of the creator of the lo-fi phenomenon that I've noticed. But the kids do find it very relaxing. One of the other things are they're very into these videos called extremely satisfying. If it's a deck of cards being shuffled or a assembly line, sometimes when I put that on, they are memorized. It gives them a chance to kind of zone out onto those things. I know they're very big on screen time, but these are things that I've noticed through my experience with them, because again, you want to meet them where they are at. Again, a lot of our kids don't have access to traveling outside their little small world. So I want to make sure that even on the resources that we give out, I believe tomorrow, I want you to get some of the ones for these online museums, online parks. You know, I mean, this is an opportunity for you, maybe even in the little small world that you may have been in, being a parent in some of these areas, to get a chance to see these and experience it with your child. These are the times to build those connections. One of the other things is I'm really big on the self-regulation. And meditation doesn't always have to be you sitting there with your eyes closed. When you go for walks, there's mindfully walking. There's mindfully eating food. We do the raisin exercise with my kids. They'd much rather do it with a Jolly Rancher, but you do what you can with middle school kids. One of the other things is yoga. I know it's a big word these days. You don't have to be a 200, 400-hour yoga trainer to do yoga. There's many resources online. Many of even our sponsors are great resources, from Urban Yoga to Dr. Bam to Bhavana Kids. They are experts in this field of using mindfulness and yoga as a form of therapy to self-therapy, because self-care is the biggest thing to make sure, because you can't take care of anyone else unless you take care of yourself. So in closing, I just want to make sure that we understand that during these tough times creates a community. And I think naturally we're going to come together. I've seen it. I didn't expect it to be the way that it was, but one thing I do know is that during tough times, some of the best people do step up and do great things. And I've seen it with my own eyes these last weeks or two here. And again, I want to give a big shout out to all the educators out there, all the educational staff, from counselors to custodians, bus drivers, our nutritional staff, district and admin. I've watched them put in those hours. I've watched them, there's so many times I've watched people talk bad about the educational system and what teachers and educators do. Well, I tell you what, within a couple days here, they pulled together some of the most amazing resources and got them out there. I mean, and this was fluid. This wasn't some great plan that we had. These people all came together with one common cause and went out there and did that. So when Riane comes on and speaks on how globally this, we want to be a cooperative society, this is all of our jobs, is to really uplift fallen humanity, because we've fallen in these last for a long time. We've been going in the wrong direction. And I'm hoping that this worldwide pandemic actually allows us to sit back and go, we are one. And if we don't work together, that's going to be our demise. And lastly, before I go, our greatest resource, it's not gold, it's not money, it's not oil, it's our youth. And if you don't realize that, look out here during these next couple weeks or months and see the youth and what they do to help change and what you can do to assist them, because they're looking for what is going to be in the future, not what you've been through already. Make sure that you meet them where they're at and help guide them. And I'm going to kind of end my section on that so we can get to some questions and let Riane give her great message.
Thank you so much, Khayree, for that information and inspiration, both. And I just want to echo that Khayree and Mary both have prepared lists of resources that will come to you via email after the webinar is closed. And as Khayree said, we want to go next before we take some questions. As all of you may be thinking, I want to encourage you to be thinking about questions that you might want to bring forward for any of our panelists after we have a chance to hear some from Riane, who will sort of offer us a perspective that takes us out of the immediacy of our immediate relationships and helps us think a little bit about where exactly what Khayree was saying. What does this pandemic set the stage for in terms of thinking of it as an opportunity for social transformation? So Riane, please.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Mary and Khayree. And I want to thank all of you for coming to this webinar. I will take it from where both Mary giving children hope, but really grounded hope, not pie in the sky hope. And what Khayree said, that this is an opportunity for us to work for, envision and work for a different and better future. And you spoke of resources. I have some resources for you because I'll tell you, if you're homeschooling or if you are an educator and you have a little break, I urge you to think of what kinds of narratives we have been teaching our children. What types of narratives do they get from the media, from even our classics? And I'm going to suggest to you that this is a tremendous opportunity for educating ourselves and educating our children in what kind of world we can create. And that's what my research has been about. And what are some of the practical steps to get there? And the first step, and if you're homeschooling, the resources that I've provided, I have a book on education called Tomorrow's Children. And if you can get a hold of it, do. But if not, you will get resources from it. Things that you might want to include in your homeschooling, things that the educators here might want to consider to weave into how they teach. Because what this is all about really, yes, we're in a crisis, but as Khayree said, we really have had so much trauma for so many people for so long. I mean, the good thing is that we're beginning to recognize and talk about trauma rather than saying, well, that's just how it is, right? How it has to be. And it's all about a new paradigm. And this is a good time, isn't it? In terms of giving grounded hope to ourselves and to the children that we are interacting with, to explore just exactly what are we talking about. And it isn't whether it's right or left, or religious or secular, or Eastern or Western. It's a whole new paradigm of shifting from what I've called a domination system to a partnership system. A system where, starting with the family, economics, politics, education, we value care, caring for ourselves, caring for others, starting even before birth and certainly in early childhood. And yes, caring for our Mother Earth. This is not what we are teaching. We're trying to add environmental consciousness to the curriculum, or add, be nice to people to the curriculum, but it's not core. So what I'm suggesting to you, and I know this is very nonlinear, and in the next webinar, I'll go into details, but avail yourselves of this time to explore and to help your children explore. And this is all based on research. I'm going to end with 2 books, really. One book that is now in its 56th US printing, and in many, many foreign editions, is The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future. And that's the first book that introduces this idea of the shift from domination to partnership, and shows that partnership is actually how we lived for millennia. This is not pie in the sky. This is something that we are capable of doing. And I'll jump to my latest book now, which is Nurturing Our Humanity, which draws on neuroscience to really show just that actually our brains really are, we get more pleasure when we give than when we receive. I mean, all of these teachings are really grounded in hard science. And so use these resources. And of course, if we're going to change our world to be better, we have to change economics. And there are a lot of resources, including my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, but also I encourage you to explore what kind of economics do we really want after this. We're seeing what we don't have paid parental leave, we don't have paid sick leave. I mean, what happened to us? This doesn't make any sense, does it? It should have all been in place for us. And we can create this caring economics of partnerism. So I'm going to stop now because I know you want to talk and I'm really looking forward to some of the questions and comments that I know so many of you will have.
Thank you so much, Riane. I'm going to go back to gallery view to see everyone together here. And those of you listening, thank you for your comments all the way along, cheering on our panelists and sharing how their words are being received by you. And now we want to open the floor to all of you to share questions that you might have by chatting them into the chat box. If you'll take a moment and chat whatever's on your mind, and in terms of questions that Mary or Khayree or Riane might be able, or all 3 of them, might be able to respond to for you. What is up in your world that you could use support around? So do please use the chat box as opposed to raising your hands, because we will take the questions from the chat. And I see a question from Jennifer asking, how can I support families as they navigate difficulties in the school systems that are not trauma informed? Do you have some wisdom on that, Mary or Khayree?
Yeah, I can comment on that, or Khayree, I saw you starting to talk. I think it's really important to first spread awareness. So as Riane was talking about, the trauma-informed practices, trauma-informed school practices we're talking about here really surround the way we connect with one another, empathy and compassion and kindness for kids, but it's also grounded in the hard physical sciences. I think it's really important to remember that we're working with very rigid and long-standing but archaic and outdated systems. And so very often the individuals that perhaps perpetuate, furthering distress or even perpetuating, causing damage, re-traumatization, they are not just acting as individuals, they're acting as a part of a very broken, rigid system that has created that. And so first we want to start with sharing information and awareness about the neurobiological science of trauma, and then of course acknowledging the very real events that our kids have been facing chronically and pervasively for years, as well as current times that all of us are facing with this pandemic, but then approach those individuals who still have yet to shift their mindsets with the same empathy and compassion, knowing that they too very well may have their own unresolved trauma. In brief, the last way I want to kind of answer that is that a non-negotiable is that this starts with our school leaders. But our school leaders can't do this alone. They have to have ample buy-in from school staff. And I oversee a team of 6 specialists. I personally have been a consultant in school settings for a long time, 15 plus, going on 20 years in education, but I've been consulting for, over half of that, I guess. You really want to start with the low-hanging fruit or invest your resources on those that already have buy-in or the seeds of buy-in. Don't spin your wheels on kind of the negative Nellies or the naysayers. So start with your leaders and start with those early adopters, identify champions, be the champion, and navigate with empathy and compassion for yourselves, for one another, and most certainly for our kids.
I don't know if I can be heard or not.
Yes, you can.
Like Mary was saying, I'd say it has to start with you. Get involved. One of the big things that even before I'm an educator in the district that I am, I'm a parent. Both of my children, one graduated already from Colonial School District, my other's a freshman. And anyone that knows me, I'm a parent first. And to be a parent, you have to be a champion for your child and for yourself. So you're going to have to go to those school board meetings. You're going to have to go to those community centers that go to all the stakeholders that are in your district and be that champion. Go out there and be the one that sounds the alarm that being a trauma-informed institution, like one of the things in my district is they started from the top. The buy-in had to be from the superintendent down, from our former superintendent to our present, have shown a true desire for being a trauma-informed institution. I know our wording for this webinar at first was trauma-sensitive, and I'd say that's where my district and many districts are. And I don't know if you can really attain just being trauma-informed. I think it's always going to be a process of growing because the problems never go away. So you're going to have to see them as they're coming and address them as they happen. So as an individual, if you have to be the one that creates a committee, if you have to be the one that is the foot soldier that goes out into these school board meetings and these community meetings and being a champion for your child or your students, that may be one of the first things, because a lot of these children are from these red line communities historically. Like I said, they're in food deserts, and a lot of them don't have the time. Like a lot of our parents, I mean, they're investing a lot of time at work and other things that they can't go to these. So as an educator or a counselor or a district person, you know the need that's there. Be that champion. Be the one that voices this. So that would be my biggest advice. When you are in a district that's not doing it, you might have to be the one.
Thank you. There's a quick practical question from somebody asking if it's okay to use what they've learned today from you and in the resources to share through weekly newsletters and to others. And I'm going to guess the answer is, of course, yes. Is that right? Yeah.
They were not, I don't own them. They were resources that I was using and given by some of the great champions out there across the nation. I mean, some from Mary, Terry Lawler, James Walsh, many of the people from the Holistic Life. These guys are amazing experts at dealing with children that are dealing in trauma. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. As a teacher, I make it a big thing to give out as many resources as possible because each one teach one, and we all have the common goal of educating the whole child. So please share and get those resources out to anyone that may need them. Because I know there's pockets of little small, like my district is, I always joke that we're kind of like a Walmart sized district. And my wife, she works in a mom and pop type store. They have such small classes, but the trauma that she's going through in her neighborhoods at her school is unbelievable because the lack of resources, such a small town, such little resources there. And even her district, they're doing all they can to help out the most vulnerable. So like I said, it starts with you. You have to be the one that's going to be the champion and sound the alarm, or be that boot on the ground that's being there for the kids, meeting them truly where they are at.
And I'll echo that. One of the things that I love about the world of those of us professionals and people working around trauma-informed care is this culture of generosity and sharing. And what we're doing here, and clearly what's so needed in our world today, even more urgently than, a week ago before this pandemic, but it was urgently needed then. This is a movement that we're participating in. I started my teaching career, 20 years ago in the classroom and taught for about 5 years and made, what my best efforts had an impact on my individual students, and I wanted to be able to do more. So I came and, pursued, higher education and the PhD. And then I was working in a whole cluster of about 12 whole schools and made an impact on that level, and became engaged in a collective impact effort here in Nashville, and then serving the whole district of 88,000 students and really our whole city of Nashville, and with this collective impact lens, which basically means that we're coming together to solve complex societal problems. And then in more recent years, just really interacting at the national and international levels in this work. And my and our one and only goal is to spread this movement forward. So please, please, please share widely.
And I'd like to add something here, because we're talking about providing you with resources, both for the short term, which is now, and that's very, very important. And we haven't talked about elders. As an elder, as part of the population that's especially vulnerable right now, I think that we also have to pay attention to that and to helping. But we really also think in the long term. And this is our opportunity. So one of the resources that you will have is a family policy agenda. And part of it is a children's Bill of Rights. Now you may say, well, right now I'm dealing with a crisis, but you're going to have some time during this quarantine time. Think about how you can spread these kinds of resources and this new thinking that goes to the foundations. I mean, we're not just talking about helping people who have been traumatized, which is essential. But we're talking about creating the kind of society that is not a trauma factory. And I tell you that as to the extent that we still orient to a domination system, we are a trauma factory in terms of the methods of child rearing, fear, shame, etc., in terms of the misdistribution of resources and the creation of artificial scarcities that is part of the domination system. So we're really talking about a transformation here. And those of you who really want to be part of this, I'm talking to you. This is a time, an opportunity for us to really re-examine a lot of what we've taken for granted and think in different ways.
Let's go next to a question because I think it's one that really speaks to some very specific kinds of equity concerns that would be good to have in our Q&A time, which is from Holly, who says, here in Portland, Maine, we have many immigrant families and students, many of whom have not been in the United States very long. How do you advise we navigate their fears and traumas related to COVID-19?
Yeah, I think with different groups, there are certainly specific and acute concerns. One primary thing would be ensuring access to information. So whether that's through, bilingual Spanish speaking or folks who can provide information and resources to both parents and kids in their same language, and doing it through relationship in a context where trust is built, perhaps for kids who have had, very legitimately eroded trust because of their experiences getting here. I think it's important to note that, of course, we don't have information that vaccines prevent the coronavirus, but we may be dealing with kids who haven't had access to healthcare, and can we increase access to healthcare and pair with resources? That's really important. But I think it's also important to emphasize kind of the triple trauma paradigm for refugees, immigrants, newcomers, where they've experienced the sort of societal trauma that they were fleeing from, and then the trauma of escape, and then thirdly, the trauma of resettlement. So now they're resettling in a world with systems and, things in a new country that they may have to relearn, which is tremendously stressful. But on the other side of it, actually, the potential for this post-traumatic growth, for healing, for strength and resilience and empowerment, in many cases can be so much greater, because the trauma of that triple trauma paradigm is behind them, and they're now in a safer, more stable place. So the more we can convey, information that sort of abates fear, helps them feel informed and aware of what's going on, and instill a sense of safety right now from this immediate threat, there's just so much potential for resilience that even other kids may not have.
Yes, I totally agree with what Mary's saying. We have a newcomer program in our district, and we have two wonderful teachers that, they are champions for their students in that program. And we have so many nations represented, from Haiti to Saudi Arabia. We have, I believe, one of our children is from Egypt, and a large portion are of Latino, Hispanic backgrounds. And even with being on the Educators of Color Committee, one of the things that we're in a process of doing is bringing in more Spanish-speaking Latino, Hispanic teachers. We've actually in the process of trying to hire one right now. He was a child of migrant workers, and he was an undocumented himself. And when he was in high school, he had the opportunity to create a program to get to give information to those newcomers on the myths and the truth that's out there. And again, I think it comes down to you being the champion, where you see the need. You have to be the one to step up and kind of do those things. To sit back in this time and wait for someone else to do it, that's not what this time is calling for. Again, when our kids, in our district, we have a very large brown and black population. A large, I'd say maybe 40 to 50% African American, and then the other large, probably about 30, 35, is our Latino and Spanish speaking population. And they, they encounter so many forms of trauma, like Mary was saying, the stigma that goes along with these kids that, maybe they weren't inoculated and things as such that you hear, not only just the ones that have, some of the same people that are living and going through the same trauma and poverty, they have those same bad thoughts. And I think it's a thing of getting that information out there. If you are a leader in the community, or you have a seat at the table where you can have some influence on what is going on in your district, and you recognize the need for your newcomers or your Spanish speakers or your any vulnerable population within your area, being the one that goes out there and kind of sounds that alarm again. And I also want to touch on what Riane was saying, that it's not only just the ones that are, are most vulnerable. It's everyone, and it is some of our generation of our fathers and mothers and grandparents that are going through a lot of trauma right now. Jokingly, I even heard one of our students say that, this was the boomer remover. But to be honest, I said, that's funny until one of your family members that applies to. I look at my mother and I look at my father, and they're in those ages these times, and I'm going, this is, a lot of generations younger than us, they don't look at this as something that's going to affect them. But when it touches home, and it's maybe your grandmother or your grandfather, you would actually see how important you being a part of this system and working together in a cooperative way, and not downplaying the seriousness of this moment. It's no different than the older generations maybe looking at the youngers going, oh, we're going to deal with this now and not what's going to happen in the future. But now you see how we are all so interconnected that you must look out for the elderly, just like you must look out for the younger generations out there. And again, Riane's point of us coming together all as one and really working together and making that paradigm shift is truly what we can capture at this moment. I think this is a definite game changer, and those of us that are really can see this really need to push this opportunity for us to work together and really make some systematic changes that are definitely needed. Like I said, the upliftment of fallen humanity is so important at this time, especially on such a global spectrum. So this is a moment that we must really take advantage of and come together.
And thank you for that, Khayree, because I think this is really a time when we have to take a very good look at our economics and why are our economics driven by such uncaring values. That there's always money for prisons, like the punitive male head of household, right? Or for weapons and wars, like the punitive hero as warrior who's violent. But somehow there's never money for the so-called women's work of caring for people, caring for people's health, keeping a clean and healthy environment. We've got to go deep now, deep, and not just look at the symptoms. We should have never have so many children in poverty, depending on school lunches. This is obscene. And it does not have to be that way. And this really is a time for us to, as I said, go deep, think of how we're thinking, what we're teaching our children who are really looking for new answers. We cannot go back to the old normal. We must create a new normal.
Thank you so much for that. I want to invite Mary to have if you had any closing comments that you wanted to. I feel like Khayree kind of got to have his, and Riane did a beautiful job. And if you would like to have, and then I'll just wrap us up with some final reminders about our next webinar and what people can expect next.
Yeah, I guess the only closing reflections that I want to share is that sometimes times of great stress and collective trauma can offer us the most critical opportunity for essential change, remembering our interconnectedness and our collective humanity, as well as our own true nature. In the great words of Rumi, the cracks are where the light gets in. And I just rest during these critical and uncertain times, knowing that we as human beings have this extraordinary power to change the world in just one generation. And that's through our children. And the time is now.
And I want to just again emphasize, I'm looking at Mel's question. Yes, we don't have to keep teaching the same old. We can come back from this time and start weaving in different elements that are more multicultural, that are less sexist. I mean, we just have Women's History Months for half of humanity, or Black History Months for multitudes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It has to be part of the curriculum. So let's really use this time. Those of you who are educators, start with just the excerpts, and you'll see so many examples of materials you can just weave in. But then start going deeper and really think of cultural transformation, because this will only be an opportunity for so long. Then there's going to be a lot of pressure to just go back to the old normal. And we can't let that happen.
Well, thank you all so much, our panelists, but also all of you who have been so active and engaged throughout our conversation, connecting with one another, and beginning to already connect with the resources that Anne has done such an amazing job of sharing with you in bits and pieces and links all the way through our conversation. It really makes for a multi-dimensional experience for all of us. I want to remind you, so we didn't obviously get to all of your questions, and many of them really relate to issues of how to transform your school districts into districts that are trauma-informed, how to get trauma-informed mindsets and practices into the core curriculum, not another add-on. You know, we have this sort of old cake, right? And we just keep adding eggs, raw eggs on top. Let's add, you know, multiculturalism, and let's add, you know, and it's like, no, this is about rebaking the whole cake. And many of you are really interested in how we do that. And that's really what our other webinar is about. So we are scheduling it for April 2nd, 2 weeks from today at this same time. It will also be free. And so in your follow-up packet from Anne, you will also get an invitation to register for that webinar. So please come back and join us again. We'll get to hear more about the model that Mary has developed for her school district. We'll get to hear more from Khayree about the ways he's implementing mindfulness practices in his classroom and beyond. We'll hear more from Riane about ways we can think about seizing this opportunity and how our schools really fit into this bigger picture of the shift from domination to partnership that we're all part of, this movement that we're all part of. And seeing ourselves as part of that movement is itself of such a powerful shift that we want to invite you all into in that webinar. So please come back on the 2nd. Please also know that your follow-up from today will include a link to the replay recording of this webinar, and feel free to share that link with others in your district, your friends, your colleagues, whoever needs it and would find it useful. So please share the replay link freely, as well as Khayree and Mary were saying, share the resources as well. I think, is there anything I'm forgetting to send people away with?
I think as always, you are right on.
Okay. So just a final thank you to all of you for the information, for the inspiration, for you modeling your own groundedness and your own wisdom. That is in some ways as important as anything we can say, is the way that you all have modeled so beautifully what that kind of presence feels like, to be with people who are able to hold the space for that better future, even when things are difficult in the immediate moment. So thank you all.
To thank Anne, who is not even visible with her picture, just with our logo. And I really want to thank our panelists. I mean, Mary and Khayree, you are wonderful. And of course, Sarah, and all of you. I'm counting on you to be agents of transformation. And you can, this is a time to listen to audiobooks, to read, to use this time, not in fretting, but in fulfilling, in really understanding how we can build that social system and economic system that can support the realization of our wonderful human potentials for consciousness, for caring, for creativity, that, as you know, as educators, all children have. And they should all have the opportunity to develop them. So thank you all and bless you all.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks for more really goodness.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
Hope to see you all then. Thank
Yep.
you.
Farewell.
Bless you. Bye.
Thank you. Everyone have a nice day, evening, and have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be well.
Be well.
Be
Be
well.
well.